Hello my loves, Tony here from TL Yarn Crafts and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is all about the linen stitch join as you go technique, which I am using in my 2022 temperature blanket. This year's temperature blanket is an amalgamation of all the previous years. I'm working join as you go panels like I did in 2019. I'm working in squares like I did in 2020, and I'm working with the linen stitch like I did in 2021. Bring them all together and this is what you got. We'll start today with a demo of the linen stitch join as you go technique. Now this is going to allow you to add rows to your blanket vertically without any seams. And after that, if you're interested, you can stick around for a bit more information about my 2022 temperature blanket, including the pattern, the size, the colors, and kind of my thinking behind designing this project. Now, before we get into all that crochet goodness, we do have to give some love to our video sponsor, Skillshare. Today's video is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for the curious and the creative. Millions of members visit this video workshop platform to learn everything from illustration to design, even how to run your small business and crush it at social media. Now, if the fact that I have no background is not explanation enough, I am currently moving, but what you might not know is that I'm actually terrible at interior design. Most of the spaces around my home are just a mishmash of all of my favorite things, and I love it that way, but I am moving into a new space, so I want to be a bit more intentional about the moments that I make around my home. To give me some inspiration, I headed to Skillshare and I met my new best friend, Mikkel Welsh, interior designer to the stars. In his class, Hollywood Chic on a Human Budget, he shares his secrets to creating luxurious design with a 9-to-5 income. I learned so much in this short class, like how to use color to enhance a mood and how to accessorize for maximum impact on a minimum budget. And Mikkel is truly so fun to watch. You're going to totally fall in love with his personality, making it even easier for you to understand and put to use all of the great tips that he offers. Now, this class and thousands more are available on demand when you upgrade to the premium membership. If you're ready to explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in your own creativity, hop on over to Skillshare. The first 1,000 subscribers to click the Skillshare link down in the description will get a 1-month free trial of the premium membership. So make sure you head down to that link. And we also have to show some love to our Cup of Caffeine sponsor. I have moved on to water for the rest of the day. My coffee quota has been reached. And today's Cup of Caffeine sponsor is Rhonda. When submitting her donation, Rhonda said, "I think you're absolutely amazing, and I have learned so much from you in the few short months that I've been crocheting again. I look forward to every pattern, every review, and every lesson. You are a true gem, lady." And so are you, Rhonda. I am so glad that you're here, and I know that you've accomplished a lot in a few months, and imagine what you'll be able to do in the next few months. I can't wait to see. Now, if you enjoy my content and want to support my channel, buy me a coffee. Who knows, I might shout you out in my next video. And I do have to say a big thank you to everyone who donated to my coffee since my last video. I talked about moving and how every dime of that is going to go to my new studio, and every dime from the coffees from this video are going to go to my mom because she came up to visit and help us pack and get us moved. She has been absolutely fantastic. I could not have done this without her. So if you donate to my coffee this week, just know that Gwen is going to be very, very happy. Now let's get to crocheting. For today's demo, I'm using Color Theory from Lion Brand. This is a 100% acrylic yarn that recommends a 5.5mm hook. I'm working up my swatch in a few different colors so you can see not only how to do the join as you go technique with our linen stitch, but also how to change colors and continue in pattern. This is just a regular old Susan Bates aluminum hook that I got from Joann. I'm starting off with my first column. I have 2 blocks in 2 colors, and if you're not familiar with how to do the linen stitch already, you can check out this tutorial video where I explain it. When we're working this join as you go technique, the odd numbered rows are going to be your right side. So this is row 1 for me, and this is the front of my stitches. When I'm joining my column here on the right side, I want to make sure the correct side, the front side of my project, is facing me. And you want to be consistent about that throughout making your blanket. To start my join, I want to find my first row, which is right here, and I'm going to insert my hook in the chain space at the end of that first row. So I'm just going from front to back through that space. I'm now going to grab my new color, yarn over the hook, making sure I leave enough of a tail to weave in later, and pull up the loop. Now, when you're making your squares, you want to start with an odd number of chains, and we're going to work to an even number of rows. So I'm going to start my swatch with 19 chains. So yarn over, pull up the loop for 1. Here's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Now I'm going to find the 3rd chain for my hook. So here's the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd chain, and I'm going to place a single crochet in that 3rd chain from my hook. From here, I'll chain 1, I'll skip the next chain, single crochet in the following chain. Chain 1, skip 1, single in the next. Chain 1, skip 1, single in the next. And I'll do that until I get to the end of my chain here. So I'm going to skip my following chain and single crochet in this last chain here. And this is where the join begins. So I'm just going to tug this to get nice and close to my work. And essentially I've made my first row and it needs to match up with my first row here. So I'm going to single crochet right back in the same place where I joined my chain in the first place. So insert into that space, yarn over, pull up the loop, and pull through the remaining loop on our hook. Then we also want to anchor our work to the next row. So this was our first row. Our next row is right here. Before we worked into the chain space, now we're working into the body of the stitch for our next row. So this is the stitch right here. I'm going to push in between the two legs of that stitch to the back of my work, yarn over, and pull up a loop and pull through for my slip stitch. So now I have anchored my work. I anchored my new column to my old column over 2 rows. So this first row and the second row. Now I need to turn my work to work in the opposite direction. First thing I want to do is chain 1, and now I will turn. So now I'm looking at the back of the row I just completed. This was the last single crochet, and this is the following chain space. We'll want to work into the chain space. So we'll place a single crochet here. Chain 1, skip the next single crochet, single in the space. Chain 1, skip the stitch, single in the space. And we'll repeat this all the way down the line. So now I'm at the end of the row, and let me tell you what we're looking at here. So we have a stitch right here between my thumbs, and then just to the left of this stitch, we have that chain 2 that we completed here before we turned our work. So we'll need to work into that chain space. So I completed a single crochet here in the space before this stitch. I'll now chain 1, and I'm going to single crochet into the chain 2 space here at the end of the row. To turn my work, I need to chain 2 here and turn. So now we're going to work back towards our first column again. So I've got my starting chain 2 here. I've got a stitch here at the base of my chain. I'll now single crochet in the following chain space. And we'll repeat our linen stitch all the way down the line until we get to our first column. So we have our last stitch here. But remember, when we turned our work, we did a chain 1 here. So our last stitch needs to go into this chain 1 space. And now, just like before, we need to anchor this new column to the old column. So we've already worked into this row. We need to go up to the next row, which is right here. So I will slip stitch into this space and slip stitch into the stitch above it right here. I'll now chain 1, turn my work, and continue in my pattern, placing a single crochet in the next chain 1 space, which is right here. Chain 1, skip the stitch, single in the space. Chain 1, skip the stitch, single in the space. Here at the end of the row, remember we have this chain 2 at the start. So I've chained 1 after this single crochet. I'm going to place the last single crochet of the row into this chain 2 space. Here we go. Chain 2 and turn my work. Work in your linen stitch back to your first column, and I'm going to show you that join one more time. Now I'm back at my first column. So we've got our join here from the previous row. So we need to join at the end of the next row. So this is the previous row right here. Here's the next row. We're going to join in the space at the end of that row with a slip stitch. So this is the row we just joined in. Now we'll go to the row above that and we'll slip stitch into the stitch of that row. And that creates our join. We then chain 1, turn our work, and continue in our linen stitch pattern. So I'm going to continue working on this block until I get to the last 2 rows of this block. I'll show you that final join and how we'll change colors. I've made some really nice progress on my block. It's anchored absolutely beautifully. If you're curious, this is what it looks like from the back. So you can see the join. It's not completely invisible, but since this is the back of the work, you won't be looking at that often. Here on the front, it feels nice and clean. It's kind of got these little teeth that go up the join of the work, but it is technically a seamless join. So now I've just got 2 more rows that I need to connect this to and 2 more rows on my new column for this block before I change color for my next block. Now, if you're a responsible crocheter, you'll weave in these ends before you start your next column, but I never do. So I want to show you kind of the technique that I'm using with my temperature blanket, since I'm not weaving my ends in as I go, to make sure that these ends make it on the back side of the work and that this join doesn't get interrupted at this point. So I just finished a single crochet here. I need to chain 1 and place my last single crochet in this chain 1 space. And now I'm going to connect it to this next row right here. But before I connect, I can see that I've got a blue tail coming out of the row where I need to join. I'm going to pull that tail to the back and then do my join. Then that way that tail ends up on the back side of my work, so I can easily weave in that end later and it doesn't interrupt my slip stitch join here. Same thing for this next row. There's a gold tail coming out of the stitch that I need to connect to. I'm just going to make sure that that tail is at the back of my work. I also tug a little bit to make sure I've got some good tension. And now I will slip stitch into this next row. I can then chain 1 and turn my work. I'm now going to continue in my pattern, single crocheting into the next chain 1 space until I get to the end of my row, and then I'm actually going to change color. So I'm working in my regular linen stitch pattern, chain 1, skip the next stitch, single in the space, chain 1, skip this stitch, single in the space, chain 1, and now I can single in my last chain 2 space. But before I complete that single crochet, I'm going to grab my new color, which is this really pretty mustard yellow that's called Dijon. I can grab my length of yarn. I'm going to now drop my pink color and yarn over with Dijon, pull through those last 2 loops. Now I can chain 2 and turn my work. So that is how I will seamlessly add a new color and create my next block. And now I'm going to work in my linen stitch pattern until I get to my old block for my join. So there's the last single crochet on that row. I can now find the next row here, slip stitch into the space at the end of that row, and I'm going to slip stitch into the stitch of the following row. So I'm continuing that slip stitch join right up the seam here. I can now chain 1, turn my work, and continue working in my linen stitch pattern. So that's how we'll create the linen stitch join as you go columns for my temperature blanket. Alright friends, I really hope that demo was helpful, and if you stick around a little bit longer, I will tell you everything that you need to know to replicate my 2022 temperature blanket. So for this year's temperature blanket, I wanted to go big, big, big. I knew that I want to make a queen size throw blanket for my guest bedroom. Now typically a queen size throw blanket is 90 inches by 100 inches, but my blanket, which is going to have 18 columns and 20 squares each, 4.5 inches per square, is going to come out to just over 80 inches wide by 90 inches long. Doing 18 columns with 20 squares each gives me 360 squares, and I'll put those remaining 5 days into the border, ending up with about a 2-inch border. When creating your linen stitch squares, you want to start with an odd number of chains and work to an even number of rows. For my squares, I'm starting with 23 chains and I'm working to 18 rows. That's how I'm achieving my 4.5-inch square. Now every year I like to do something kind of fun to recognize the first of the month. This year I'm doing a little bobble right in the middle of the square. If you want to create a bobble in your square, work up to the 10th row. On your 10th row, you're going to work up to the chain that is after your 5th single crochet. Now, instead of doing that chain, you're going to do a 5 double crochet together bobble in that next stitch. After your bobble, you're going to continue into your linen stitch pattern, and in the following row, you're going to treat that bobble like a chain. So you're going to place a single crochet into that bobble on the following row, and then just continue on with your linen stitch pattern. Now, I was really excited about this year's temperature blanket because since I was going big, I was like, let's go big with the yarn as well. So I worked together with my friend Bonnie of Green Letter Day to create a custom 15 color palette. This palette has literally all my favorite colors, from beautiful greens and turquoises, some purples, neutral colors, pinks. I mean, I went completely off the grid when it comes to creating a temperature blanket palette. Typically, temperature blankets are seen as working from cool colors to warm colors, but as you can see with this year's temperature blanket, I am shirking all the rules and using the colors that really speak to me. So consider that when you're creating your temperature blanket palette, just use whatever colors speak to you. If it's different shades of gray, totally fine. If it is the rainbow colors, also fine. Or if you want to go off the beaten path and build your own color palette, honey, it's your blanket. Do whatever you want. Bonnie dyed my colors on her squishy 100% superwash merino DK weight base. It's absolutely beautiful, and all the colors have kind of this tonal nature. So they're not completely solid like the superwash merino that I used last year. These colors have a lot of dimension, and it just makes sure I want to travel from square to square. In addition to the DK weight yarn, I'm using a 5.5mm crochet hook. It's giving me a really good gauge. And this year I'm not using anything super special. I'm just using an aluminum Susan Bates hook. The aluminum works really well with superwash merino wool, so I'm able to keep consistent tension and I can just flow through all of my stitches. Like I mentioned, I have 15 colors, which means I have 15 steps in my temperature gauge. This year my gauge ranges from 24 degrees on the cool end to 90+ on the warm end. I am just about to hit the warmest color here in the middle of June. Not really excited about that because I'm still kind of in the middle of that. It is so hot, but it does allow me to finally see what all of the colors in my blanket together will look like, and I have to say it is stunning. Now, I have a lot of reasons to love this design, one of which is that it's completely customizable. I wanted something that was easy to work up, that I could blow up onto this bigger palette, but I could easily scale this down to a baby blanket and scale it all the way up to a California king. It's whatever suits me. It's easy enough to change these linen stitch squares to get the size that I want, and then break that down doing a little bit of math to make sure I have the right dimensions and the right number of squares. I also like that I was able to incorporate a lot more colors into this blanket since it is so large. Going from 12 steps on my gauge last year to 15 steps this year felt completely seamless. It doesn't feel overdone or like the colors are getting too wacky. The colors that Bonnie and I were able to put together, the flow of it is fantastic. So as I transition from my cooler months to my warmer months, I'm still able to see lots of gorgeous color, and I really appreciate getting a lot of variation in my months. It's just an all-around fun pattern, so I really hope that you will give it a try. So that is the deal for my 2022 temperature blanket. We are now in the middle of June, and I'm excited to see how the rest of this shapes up. After I finish all of my squares, I get to add the border and eventually weave in all those ends, but that comes later. Now, if temperature blankets are a new concept to you, I'm very curious to see if this is something you'd be interested in trying. Drop down in the comments and let me know if you've tried a temperature blanket before, or if it's something you think you could get into. Now, if temperature blankets have been on your to make list for a long time, but you don't know where to start, don't worry, honey, I got you. I have a free 5-day email course that will take you from concept to execution. Everything from how to pick the right pattern to getting the right yarn, all of your tools and notions, and also how to stay motivated throughout the year. If that sounds like something that might be helpful, head down to the description and sign up for that email course. Alrighty, friends, I am signing off for the weekend to catch up on my temperature blanket and catch up on my packing. I hope you have a fabulous day. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and I will see y'all next time. Bye!